Hey guys, welcome back to Respect the Drive. Today, my guest is PTSRS. That's right, Will Lee is on the show today, and he has accrued over 100,000 followers on his Instagram page, PTSRS, celebrating paint to sample Porsches. But he's far more than just a Porsche-phile. He knows his way around a lot of ordinary cars in a way that most people have no idea. He's the kind of guy that you want as a witness to a kidnapping because he'll be able to identify the exact color, year, make, model, and trim of the car that took the kid. It's incredible. And I listen to a lot of murder podcasts. I know that sounds like kind of weird, but that's one of my ways to de-stress. I listen to My Favorite Murder. I hear these stories, and true crime is just kind of like a side passion. I like listening to those stories. And I always go nuts when someone says, "Oh, it was a green car." Dude, was it a 93 Civic or what? Come on, you got to give me something. And Will Lee, he's the guy. He's the guy who could identify. Man, if he's the witness to the crime that you're a victim of, you're going to be okay. He's going to get you there. But how are you doing? Are you guys managing? Are you doing all right? I know we're still kind of breaking through isolation, but for the most part, we're all just staying still. So I can imagine the single ones out there. You've swiped through all of the Tinder matches you could possibly have in 5 miles, then 10 miles, then 20 miles. And maybe you're just kind of ping-ponging back and forth between folks that you've already talked to. Like, oh, do you remember me from March? Well, yeah, now it's August. But anyway, Will Lee, he doesn't talk a lot in public. He doesn't have a big public persona, even though he has this massive page with an incredible readership, including the likes of some Porsche executives and Jerry Seinfeld. We actually got to sit down in person. That's kind of a rare occurrence. Haven't done that in quite a long time, but we've got our little studio up there in Woburn, Massachusetts at Garage 42, which is a car storage facility. So if you're looking to just winterize your vehicle or store for the long term, give them a call. But we had a pretty long conversation, actually. I had to trim it down a little bit. So where we get started with this interview, Will's talking about his childhood in Canada. He emigrated from South Korea, where he was born, to Toronto in the second grade. And here's Will Lee. I know that if I was on a road trip with you, I would point out maybe like some hot rods or some crazy thing that's driving by, and you would be like, that's a 1994 Ford Taurus SHO, and that color is ultra rare, and they only made it in this and I'll be like, why do you know this? So where did that come from? Did you start like looking at cars in Korea, or was that like, oh, I'm in Canada and now there's all these like different style cars? Because the Korean car market was not what it is.
Yeah, no, I love talking about this because you're right. I'm not a speed freak. I'm a data freak in a big sense too. I like to collect knowledge, and I'm not an engineer by trade or by birth. So I love memorizing everything else about cars. And yeah, it goes back to my, just like when I was very little in Korea. And again, the Korean car market, very different back then, just heavily, Korean produced cars. But I had a knack for actually being able to identify every car that was out in the Korean streets, even when I was very little.
See, this is what I think really separates you from everybody else, because we all can say like, oh yeah, that was like a European market, this or that. But Korea, that is such a vastly different market, and the cars, especially like American cars that were in Korea, were like expensive.
Yeah. So, one funny story is around 2001 was when the Motor Trend's car of the year was the Chrysler PT Cruiser. And also the PT Cruiser was one of the first relatively affordable import cars in the Korean market. And I remember the Korean car magazines had the PT Cruiser on the cover. Like, it was the car, right? And still, back then dollars, so I'm thinking of won now. In won, that car was around like 50 million won, which is around, back then it was like $50,000 US for
Imagine.
PT Cruiser. And yet I still saw those on the road, especially in my neighborhood of Seoul, where it, not to sound arrogant, but it was a more like affluent neighborhood. And
Sure.
So a lot of people had import cars back then relative to, it was like a bit of a microcosm in a sense. And that's where I would see PT Cruisers driving around. And then I'm like, wow, that's an import car. And people had this perception of like being able to tell apart a Sonata and then, oh, that's an import car, regardless of if it's a PT Cruiser or or a Mercedes or whatever, that was kind of the thing, was that you had an import car.
That's the
therefore.
status symbol.
Yeah, that's the status.
It's so weird. I mean, I can't even imagine like a PT Cruiser being a status symbol.
It is a status symbol for, well, yeah, not higher up, I would say, but yeah,
No.
it is a symbol, I would say.
You're in Canada, you're identifying all these new cars, which are like, you're seeing like totally different market, because you're
Yeah.
probably seeing a lot more like not crazy expensive German cars. You're probably
Yeah.
seeing a lot more American cars. You're probably
Right.
seeing a lot of like, just things that are not the status symbols of having an import in Korea.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you as a kid? Like, are you obsessed with everything, or are you only obsessed with like the Ferraris?
No. I was, even back then, the first thing I did when I landed in Canada was when we went grocery shopping, I went straight to the magazine stand, and I didn't go for the Motor Trend. I went for the Consumer Reports Buyer's Guide, because I wanted to understand the Canadian car market.
You're 8.
I'm 7,
You're 7.
but I thought I was 20 in my mind, but I thought I was already like knowing a lot about these cars, but I wanted to learn more. So I would flip through, and then that's how I really like absorbed the market. And I think with cars, I'm not really good at memorizing anything else, but cars, when I see it once, I just like remember it like forever.
I can only imagine the sense of pride that your parents had as like immigrant Koreans in Canada watching their 7-year-old son reach for the Consumer Reports Guide. There might as well be like, oh, he's going to be a doctor. This is happening.
No, the thing is, I still had to convince my parents to buy that. And you know those things where people are like, oh, buy me a toy or whatever, and then still buying it, when your kid asks to buy something, unless it's like a textbook, then the parents are like, oh, okay, well, I don't know, you got to do something good in return. So I had to do that. I had to bargain with my parents for Consumer Reports car magazine.
That's like actually the most incredible. That's outrageously bizarre, because everyone else is going for like the jumping truck over a dirt trail, or like the Ferraris lined up on an Evo magazine or something, and you're like, oh, the brake test on the Chrysler Sebring seems to be subpar. I'd like to learn more about that.
I like the Consumer Reports because what they did was they had those ratings in like those color balls.
Right, they're
Yeah.
like the red, the full red, the blank, and the black.
The black, right? And so I like the fact that, at least in my head at that time, Consumer Reports had like a very objective way of comparing every car. And so I was very influenced by that. I'm sure a lot of consumers are still today, that, okay, like this Mustang, very good, but the reliability, it's not recommended.
It's not
Therefore, it must be a
recommended.
bad car.
It's amazing. And Consumer Reports, I mean, we don't need to go too deep on this, but I like Consumer Reports because they buy all their cars. They're
Yeah.
totally like they're not an arm of the brands. And
sure.
that's always been very cool.
Yeah.
And which is where this explains a lot, because you are not an arm of Porsche with PTSRS. So first of all, what is PTSRS?
PTSRS stands for Paint to Sample RS from the GT3 RS. And the reason why is because it really, the whole page was started as a visual diary that I wanted to curate just for my own self. I found myself one day on Renlist. I was actually on Renlist, just for a couple months back, and I just needed a distraction for my senior year thesis. And I found this thread that was just focused on paint to sample. And at that time, I'm telling you, my avatar on Renlist was a white GT3 RS.
And this is while you're in college.
While I was in college.
What were you studying in college?
Public policy.
Okay.
Yeah, and definitely I've stuck to that.
Just disappointing the family all around. No, but it's that. So all right, so you've got this white GT3 avatar on Renlist.
Yeah. And that kind of encapsulates the cars that I was aspiring for. I liked white cars. And then I found this thread, and PTS at that time was still like a very like only those, like if you know type of deal. I didn't even know that the Porsche dealers, there's like varying levels of knowledge at each and every dealer, but certainly it wasn't like everyone who's a Porsche enthusiast or whoever who knows about Porsche knows about PTS. Definitely wasn't like that. So it was really just concentrated this one thread where all the paint to sample enthusiasts were just talking about the latest deliveries, and specifically the GT3 RS at that time in February of 2016. When I started the account, that's when the paint to sample the first ones were really starting to get delivered to the dealers. And I thought, okay, this is cool. And the vibe that I got was there weren't going to be that many paint to sample GT3 RSs. So I figured I could start a registry on my own, not for like profit or whatever, just on an Excel sheet. I want to gather information on as many paint to sample GT3 RS as possible. I just have this thing for collecting data. Like I'm a nerd for that.
Right. And this is 997 generation.
991.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
right. You are young. Okay. All right. So that's amazing. So what was your impression of like learning about what paint to sample started with? Because it wasn't always like this big thing. In fact, like you can get, I mean, there's like 964s and stuff that are PTS, and those are the ones that really blow my mind.
Yeah. I think the OG paint to sample enthusiasts really took pride in the fact that, and I don't mean to characterize people in any way, but I think there was a certain level of pride that this was very special and not that many people knew about it. And so when they order their paint to sample a car and they, bring it to show it to their friends or bring it to a Cars and Coffee or go out to a track day, and then people go, oh, what's that color? Having that conversation of it's a paint to sample and all that. But so that was my impression, was that this was a very, like, not a well-kept secret, but still, a reasonably...
Yeah, I look at it like,
Yeah.
I look at it the way like BMW M cars were in the 90s. Like
Yeah.
they existed, and like if you saw an M3, an E36 M3, like you knew it was different than your neighbor's 328. You just didn't know why. And then
Yeah.
you're like, it said M3 on it. What does
Yeah.
that mean? Like, and even if you'd go to some dealers, the dealers didn't all know what that kind of stuff was. So I guess that makes sense.
That's crazy, though. For me, M cars were always around, right? So
In America, it was very bizarre, especially if you weren't like in a wealthy area. Like if
Yeah.
you were just in kind of like a podunk, whatever,
Yeah.
like a normal suburban town where everyone drove Buicks and Oldsmobiles, like
Yeah.
you weren't just like experiencing M Town, as they say.
I could understand that, just because if I think of the old M cars, like the E36 M3 or the E30 M3, they don't look visually that much different from their non-M cars. I mean, maybe the E30 had like the wider body, the rear arches and stuff, but definitely the E36 M3 just looks like a 3 Series coupe
It does. It looks very much
with
the
nicer
same.
wheels. Maybe that's about it. Yeah.
So when does the page gain traction? Because okay, here you are, you're just like collecting things, and like, what does that do? I mean,
So yeah, I mean, all I did was every time the reason why I started on Instagram was not because I liked the platform anyway, but that's where I was finding the most information on these cars being delivered. So that's why I would just, if I found a car that was being delivered in some dealer in Los Angeles, then I would take a screenshot of that and then I would put it in my Excel and be like, okay, this British Racing Green or whatever delivered to X dealer and has these wheels, these headlights, for me to be able to like, distinguish the different cars. And then I would put a couple of hashtags just to kind of maybe let other people like find out about the page. But
Sure.
By no means was this like, I want to gain a lot of followers. This is for followers, all that. This was just for me, right?
what kind of information were you putting in those posts? I mean, your posts now have a very distinct style. We'll talk about that. But like at the beginning, you were like, okay, so what else are you gonna say other than like it came from this dealer and it's this color?
Yeah, I think just my very earliest post didn't have that much information because it was just purely, I had the information in my Excel sheet, and posting it on Instagram was really just a way for me to keep track of the cars for my own self. So I didn't need to write detailed captions because I didn't really have a yearning to share it with a lot of people. It was just like, okay, now I found the data on this, so I'm going to have like a visual record of it, right? But then when I did start to add some more
Color.
detail, yeah, I think what really started it, I'm remembering now, was I featured this birch green. It's also called light green in German. It's like Lichtgrün, whatever. Yeah. And I featured this car because it was also very, very loaded in terms of what you call Porsche exclusive CXX options.
Ooh.
Those special wishes options that are not on the configurator. You have to consult with your dealer separately. Like, I want, deviated this, that. So I got reached out by someone, a person who I still keep in contact with from time to time, very well-known collector in Germany, especially. And he and I got in touch about his Birch Green GT3 RS, and he's emailed me so many pictures of his car, like all the different details where he went deviated stitching. This is Doug DeMuro's worst nightmare, by the way, but deviated stitching, XYZ, all that. And then that's where I was like, wow, this is super fascinating. I didn't know people do this with GT3 RSs. And I wanted to share all those details. And I wanted to first document it in the caption and then also share it, right? And that's where that car was probably one of the most like well-received cars in terms of like, wow, a lot of people were coming into the page. Their attention was drawn because they saw a thumbnail of a really bright green GT3 RS, and then they scroll through the pictures and they see, oh wow, this is crazy. Like the coordination here is insane. The spec is
like
unreal.
no one's ever seen anything like this.
Exactly. So, and I wrote out everything like that, and that's where I got a lot of good feedback from people saying I really appreciate the details of that you're putting into this post. And this was, I think, well before. I definitely think I was different compared to a lot of other automotive accounts at the time, where they would post pictures and like be like repost and tag your friends and all that, and that was about it. Meanwhile, I was writing like full-fledged articles, and I didn't think people would actually read through them, but people did. And so to get back to your question on how, why, what really ticked, in the first 6 months, so I started the page in February of 2016, and then by August 2016, I was at 50,000 followers already.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's not a thing that happens on Instagram.
It doesn't happen anymore on Instagram, and I have so many things to say about how Instagram's algorithm has evolved, but 2016 was definitely, I was very lucky in that sense that I started the page in 2016 when the algorithm was definitely more favorable for people, as long as they produce content and consistently, that their chronological feeds and all that, none of all the other stuff that they've really, squeezed into Instagram's algorithm. Before all that, it was just like, if you post good stuff, then people will come in and they'll like it and then go, right? And that's how I think I was able to really expand my audience, because I didn't really have to do much other than just making sure I always add a couple of hashtags so that people can find me. But besides that, I didn't do any other marketing or whatever.
And this all just started from like the comfort of your dorm or apartment?
Yeah, it was incredible. It's actually so I graduated around May. So I only the first 3 months or so of the page was while I was still in school, right? But even while I was in school, I would be like telling my roommates, guys, this thing has 1,000 followers now. And my roommates always still like remind me about, oh yeah, like remember when like you would just come up and be like, oh, 1,000 followers and all that. And I was genuinely excited because I was like, this is crazy. Like I didn't expect, my personal account had like 300 followers, so 1,000 just seeing it at all was incredible. And then it would hit like 10,000. I'm like, guys, this is
like, it's happening.
It's happening. Yeah, and I never thought it would hit 100,000.
Did you even know anybody who owned a Porsche at the time personally?
I did. Not paint to sample though, but that there is a story as to how I got into this brand.
Yeah, that's what I want to hear, because this could have been anything. You could have done this with Ferraris. You could have done this with MSO, McLarens, although it wasn't really as big at the time. But like, why Porsche?
So why Porsche? So that I would have to, that I can answer as to like, did I know any Porsche owners? Because that kind of ties well together.
Because at this point, if I saw this account today, I'd be like, that's a bot planted by Porsche to be like, look at these grassroots kids making these accounts about our colors. Whereas like, it really just did this independently. Yeah,
no, it started so organically. I mean, I think a lot of people, when they try to think about like what made it tick for their passion for brand, it's like, it can be as easy as like they saw a Testarossa drive by in their local town, and that's what started the passion for Ferraris. And for me, actually, at Princeton, which is where I went to school, there were a disproportionately large number of Porsches that would be driven around. So like, Princeton has a nickname called P-Town, and in my head I thought that was Porsche Town, because around the downtown area where I would just see a lot of Porsche 911s. And actually, the thing that really got me about 911s in particular was, especially in city driving, people like to like keep it in second or like first or second.
Oh, they want to wind it out.
Yeah, they wind it out. But then it had a certain resonance to it. It was like the 991s, the naturally aspirated, even the Carreras, like,
Oh, yeah.
even without Porsche Sport exhaust, like when they're just driving slowly in first or second,
There's
it's
no
like,
mistaking
There's
it.
no mistaking that's a Porsche, right? I was so obsessed with that sound, and so that got me already starting to like take pictures of the car and be like, wow, this is super cool. What got me really into the Porsche brand though was I met this gentleman very just randomly while I was taking a picture of a Land Rover Range Rover extended wheelbase, which was very new at the time. In town, I would just walk around the downtown Princeton area and take pictures of like nice cars, because there'd be a lot, right? And then I was like obsessing over this car because I've never seen it. And then some gentleman was like also checking it out, and then we both realized that we were both checking out a Range Rover, right? Which is like
not a
yeah,
thing.
not a thing, because you see Range Rovers everywhere. But we both knew that that thing was stretched, right?
Right.
So
like I've never seen.
I've
This
never
is
seen it.
different.
It's the L. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly.
And then that's how we were like, oh wow, yeah, this is super cool. And then he told me, yeah, I actually own the shop that I'm like we're standing right in front of. He was like a silver, like a jewelry store or something like that. And so we started talking more about cars in general inside the store. And then he said,
He's like, come step inside my office.
yeah, come step inside. I was like, yeah, I didn't even realize what was going on. Because like, oh, we're talking cars. Let's go inside. I'll go inside. So you have candy?
Never follow a stranger to a second location, Will.
Yeah. So
I got more Range Rovers in the back.
So yeah, we went inside, we talked more, and then he basically capped off the conversation by saying, "Hey, let's meet up. Actually, here's my number or email, and I have a car that you might like."
And this is about a car. I thought you said card. I was like, this is about the time when Will Lee needs a business card.
No. I have a car that you might like. So I'm like, okay. He didn't tell me what it was. He wanted to keep it a secret, and then so a couple days later, we decided to meet up at a certain time on campus. Actually, he rolls up in a black 997 Carrera S Carrera Black Edition. So it looks pretty cool. It has all the good features in it, and it was a manual. And he was like, "Hey, yeah, let's get inside the car and let's go for a ride." I was like, "Okay." At that time, it did not occur to me that I was getting into a stranger's car, as all my friends would remind me after. But I was like, wow, I get to ride in the Porsche.
I think as a car person, like we all can say like, we taught our kids and we tell our friends like, don't be stupid, don't do that. But if like somebody pulls up in the right car, we're getting in.
Yeah, no, and he had the right smile and all that.
He was just like a trustworthy guy with a 911. Yeah.
As people would say today, he passed the vibe check.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I got it, and then we were just talking throughout. We were just driving around town, and I was in the passenger seat. And so I can't say I fell in love with the handling and all that, but still.
Was there a moment where you're like, is this guy hitting on me?
No, not at all. Because we were just so obsessed about talking about the car. I don't remember exactly what we really talked about. I think we just talked about anything and everything about cars,
sure.
Especially the Porsche. And yeah, we would just do a couple laps around, town, and then we would book it a little bit on the Route 1 in New Jersey, the notorious Route 1 in New Jersey. And still, like, what I do remember was the sound. It's naturally
so
aspirated
distinct.
997. It's not even an S that people would obsess over. It was a regular Carrera.
I think people forget that because people always just say like, "Oh, Porsche sound good," and they'll reference like a GT3. I'm like, you don't need to.
No, you can have so much fun ringing out a bass Carrera.
Dude, it's crazy.
I still want like a bass one day too. But anyway, so I love the sound, especially when you ring it out. It's you can't forget that, right? And then so we stopped somewhere, and then he's like, "You drive it." I was like, "Oh." I didn't tell him that. Actually, I told him that I can't really drive a manual, but he was like, no, just it's fine. It's just a car. Like, he wasn't super obsessive over the clutch being burnt out. And I was like, yeah, just drive it. It's fine. I was like, okay. So for a bit, it wasn't that much. I knew the basics of
like you understood.
Yeah, I knew that you had to like ease in and out and all of that. I just didn't have the muscle memory, I would say, yet.
Right.
So I did drive it for a bit, and I mean, obviously I stalled and all that too, but still, like, and it was just for a couple blocks. But at the same time, that was my first time really like driving a Porsche 911, and I was really, really happy about it. But at the same time, I don't really remember being enamored by that car at that time because I was so stressed about not burning its clutch or whatever.
Right,
So that was just more like, okay, like I got to ride on a Tiger, and then like here, take it back.
Yeah,
right?
please take it back.
So how I really fell in love with the brand though was when he the following year got traded in his 997 for, and then I think he got a Cadillac ELR at one point. I was like, okay, that's
wow.
a phase. Yeah. I got to drive a Cadillac ELR, but anyways, that's another story. And then he traded the ELR in for a 991 Carrera Black Edition. And the first thing he did when he pulled up to the same spot that he picked me up in the campus with a 997 was, it's a PDK, so you can really drive it.
Yeah.
And then that's when I got to drive that thing, the car felt like, it's like the Cinderella finds her shoes moment, where the car just felt like gloves. Like I found the right gloves. I found the right shoes. When I was driving around town, the handling when I was going off ramp, and the impression that I still have with Porsches that I think really distinguish itself from my experience with other like sports car manufacturers is this car, I feel like I'm in control versus if I'm driving a Ferrari, or if I'm just even in the cockpit of a Ferrari or Lamborghini or an Audi R8.
It feels like you're hanging on for dear life.
Yeah, it feels like I have to like tame the car or something like that instead of me having full control. And that was where I was like, wow, this is a car that it's also not like ludicrously like supercar, hypercar expensive. But this is one of those cars where there are many cases out there of people who have worked really hard and have also gotten lucky. They can find themselves in a 911, right? And
right.
so I was like,
you don't have to make the right stock picks.
Exactly. So that's where at that moment when I really drove the 991, my takeaway was, this is my it car and I want to get one.
It's amazing how PDK really democratized Porsches, because suddenly you know, as someone who wasn't confident driving a stick shift, and there's different levels of that. And there's people who just don't drive a stick to begin with. There's also people who drive a stick, but who are like, I don't really want to go and ruin your nice sports car because I'm not confident enough doing what I'm doing. You get PDK, and now you get to actually have objectively the full experience, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty much all there.
Yeah.
I mean, I've driven manuals and PDKs, GT3s, Carrera S's, whatever. And I know for a fact that like I don't walk away from the PDKs feeling like I've just missed out. It's a different experience for sure, but it's not like oh no, you haven't really driven a Porsche because you didn't have the manual. Like it's not like that.
I mean, I do understand that if I put myself in the shoes of someone who's only grown up with manuals, it is a very different experience, and I get that. But there are lots of other people who don't have the background of having bought a manual car from when they were young or whatever and had cars all their life. Like, for example, in my life, I didn't have my own car until like I was 22, like first job and all that.
Right.
Yeah. So I didn't have like a high school car where I could like buy a beater and all that.
Well,
right?
you also grew up in a city.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, like a walkable city with public transportation.
Right.
I mean, I grew up in a town of 5,000 people. I didn't have a car. I don't go to school.
Yeah.
It was like, you need a car to go anywhere.
Yeah.
You couldn't walk to a store.
Right.
You want a pack of cigarettes? You're driving.
Yeah. So I think that's
not
why...
that I smoke. I don't know why that's not a great. That's not a good example. I've smoked like 2 cigarettes in my whole life.
Okay. All right, Tom.
I have really bad asthma, you guys.
Yeah. So I think that's
By
why.
the way, to the kids, if you're ever trying to say no to drugs, just tell them you have asthma. That usually works. I guess the kids will just hand you a gummy now. Anyway, I'm sorry. Carry on.
Yeah. So yeah, to go back to the whole discussion about PDKs. Yeah, PDK is the reason why I fell in love with Porsche. To really sum it up in a nutshell, the manual still, I'm sure, was a great car and all that, but I just wasn't good at it. That's my fault, sure. But with a PDK, that's where I was like, wow, this is not a sluggish transmission. I was like driving it in manual mode.
Oh, it's bananas.
Yeah,
bananas.
Yeah. And yeah, it was just so fun.
So the page grows and grows and grows and grows. Now we're up over 100,000 followers on the page on Instagram, and you have a very all right. So that number doesn't mean anything to me because there are plenty of people who have 1 million followers or 500,000 followers. The quality of that 100,000 followers is something that is just like almost unheard of, because the people who follow you are working at Porsche, executives at Porsche, people who actually are part of PTS. This guy Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah, this guy
Jerry Seinfeld, who just casually makes a post on his Instagram page about you, like at you. He has a
Yeah,
car.
that day was pretty crazy.
I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
I was running around being like, what just happened?
I remember exactly. Like there are days in your life where you know exactly where you were at, what you were doing, even what day of the week it was.
Definitely.
That was me. And not to like place certain individuals on a pedestal like celebrities or whatever and all that, but still like you know that Jerry Seinfeld is like a really well-known, like one of the most prolific Porsche collectors and all that.
Look, you know what? You can try to like play this down as much as you want. Validation from Jerry is pretty hot. That's big stuff.
Yeah.
So what was that? What was that? Why did that even happen?
Right. So what I had done was actually I don't remember if I made a post about that car first. I certainly knew about that car. So the car that I'm talking about is Jerry Seinfeld's PTS. So first of all, it's a 991.1 GT3 RS. But what's really cool about that is it has the color that was exclusive to the 918 called liquid chrome metal blue. And that for the 918 was a $64,000 color option.
That's insane. So for reference, any PTS non-believers here, PTS used to be a $7,000 option. Now it's 12. Is that
It's
where we're
around
at
$12,000, $13,000.
now?
Yeah.
So at the time, it was probably around 7 to 10.
Yeah. But it's $64,000. That was crazy. But again, if you're talking about a hypercar, then one of the launch colors of the 918 was the other liquid chrome, is liquid chrome metal silver.
Right, but we're talking about an $800,000 car.
Right.
We're not talking about a $280,000.
Right. So essentially, Jerry specified his GT3 RS in a 918 color, and actually it was more than $64,000. I can't say the final figure of like what additional costs Jerry had to incur. In addition, I don't think at that time any Porsche VIP would have just like been able to ask for it. I think there was a combination of Jerry wanted, I don't know why he had picked that color. I would love to know one day, but he had picked that color, and probably the fact that he was Jerry. Yeah. Then Porsche was able to go through, was willing to go through the feasibility tests and all that to actually apply a 918 color with like multiple layers of painting and all that on a GT3 RS.
Do you know why that? I mean, I'm sorry if I'm asking like a super technical question.
Oh, for sure.
Like why is that a big deal?
Why the color is expensive, or why is it a big deal on a GT3 RS?
Well, like I understand why it's a big deal on a GT3 RS because it was exclusive to the 918. But like,
right.
Why is there like a feasibility study?
Right. So the reason why, and this will also answer why the color costs more on the GT3 RS versus a 918, because what Porsche does, and don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure about this, is let's say they approved a color for the 918, right?
Sure.
But you can't just spray that color. At least Porsche won't just paint that color on a 911 without actually making sure that paint works well on the 911. And because the 918 has different parts and different architectures and all that, while the 911 has a different mix of maybe some carbon fiber here, but mostly aluminum and all that. Right?
I see. So they want to make sure that it actually like adheres properly to all the different surfaces,
right,
and reflects properly, so it doesn't look like it's 5 different colors on a bunch of different surfaces.
Right. And the classic example is the color inconsistency that you see on the front bumper, which is plastic, versus the other panels, where you automatically note a slight difference, especially under certain lighting, right? And Porsche is very particular about making sure that with every new car, since they know that every new car has a different mix of panels, that they have to, for even all the paint to sample colors that you see that are approved and available for the current 911, they would need to be retested for the next generation of 911s, or retested on a Macan Panamera, for example. And it's, I think, still insane. And I would love to actually perhaps even go to the facility that does the painting and all of that, because there's a whole reason why paint to sample is so expensive compared to, it's not just that Porsche realized there's a profit potential here. I mean, I'm sure there's a bit of that, sure. But a lot of it has to do with logistical reasons.
Sure. Yeah. So there's probably a huge like warehouse or like meat grinder of like scrap bumpers and
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So they go through, and so Jerry orders this. They say they basically like, yeah, we're gonna go for it. They get through the feasibility thing, and then they do it. They're like, yeah, we accept your money, and boom, there's the car.
So the thing about Porsche exclusive 2 is that you don't find out the final sticker price of the car with not just regular car. With regular cars, yeah, you negotiate the price, all that, right?
Sure.
With special wishes, CXX options included, especially for those options that haven't been done before, then you will find out the final price tag when you take delivery and see the window sticker. Like that's a thing. And then that's I think now the exclusive department has matured enough that a lot of the things that customers want are like there's a price tag for it.
Like
right?
it's pretty obvious what it's going to cost.
It's pretty obvious what it is, but definitely in the early years of PTSRS, not the early years of Porsche exclusive, but the early years of my page at least, I remember this one car that I featured that belongs to a friend of mine. It was an ultraviolet 991 GT3 RS, which is not PTS, but the fact was it had a lot of CXX options on it, right? And then I think in total it was 5 figures worth of exclusive CXX options.
And CXX is like the VVIP stuff. That's like
no. So there's CXX is actually CXX is just the option code on the window sticker for any options that just don't exist on the configurator.
It's off menu.
Yeah, if off menu, but you can still ask for it when you consult with your dealer saying, hey, I want deviated stitching on my armrest, right? Then that you might not see it on the configurator.
Okay.
So that'll just be like, they'll be like, sure, yeah, that we can just add it, but it'll fall under the one option line item of CXX. And if there's like 20 special options that you want to add, it'll all fall under that one line item called CXX. And then you'll see like $20,000.
Yikes.
It's not just one option. It could be multiple options, right? But to answer your question about whether it's VIP or not, there's CXX, and then there are the VVIP options. I don't know like what's the separating factor,
Sure.
but there are definitely options that certain cars I featured that belong to owners with a lot of history with Porsche were able to pull off that a first-time Porsche customer wouldn't be able to.
Right. So this particular gentleman, he's ordering his GT3 RS. He's got some CXX options.
Yeah.
And is it just out of control? Like
yeah, well, that car in particular, he's actually, and it's an ultraviolet with ultraviolet painted wheels, and maybe some PTSRS readers might know this. He has a really good attention to detail, so it wasn't really out of control. Everything was really intended, I would say, in that spec. But the story he told me was with that car, he only found out the final price tag, inclusive of the CXX options, when he took delivery of it. And so that's when I realized, wow, this is like mysterious stuff, and I love it. When I learned things like that, that's what made me want to even learn more about this program.
Right. All right, back to Jerry though.
Yeah.
So Jerry gets his car. It exists. I don't know why it exists. Why does he make this post?
I don't know. I have a couple hypotheses here.
So tell us what the post was.
Right. Okay. So the post was he addressed it with my name, like PTSRS. Here's a cool one for you.
Yeah,
right?
this one's for you.
This one's for you, right? So, and then he described this is a one of one, very special 991 GT3 RS in liquid chrome metal blue or whatever. And then I was thinking like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. Not just because I knew of the car, but the fact that like Jerry was talking about it. But the caption itself wasn't very, very long.
No,
like,
it wasn't
going into the details.
It was still mysterious.
Yeah.
And in fact, if I remember correctly, the car was like parked forward, so you're just seeing like the rear 3/4.
You're seeing the rear. I think the car was in his hangar and out on the West Coast.
So you weren't getting like a full like, ooh, wow, that's the car. It was just kind of like this little nugget, this little taste where it was like clearly somebody either took a picture on their phone or he took a picture on his phone.
Yeah, he took a picture probably in his pajamas or whatever.
And
it was a Monday night, so I don't think he was exactly suited up or whatever. But
right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he took it, and I don't know. I would love to talk about that with him someday. But anyways, I thought it was incredible when I saw that. And it wasn't like I was scrolling through my feed and I saw Jerry posted, it was my phone started to get a lot of notifications while I was doing laundry on a Monday evening. And so I was like, okay, I mean, I turned off notifications for likes and comments and all this. Like, what could this be? And then I looked at it, and then, oh my gosh, that's when I saw like people are, oh my God, you're like Jerry posted about you. Jerry mentioned you. And I was like, oh, this is crazy. And yeah. And immediately after he posted it, the thing that I was onto already was looking at that picture and going, what other CXX options?
Yeah,
are
what's
there?
different about
what's
this
different
car?
about this car other than the paint? Because I'm sure he didn't stop at just the paint. And with that car in particular, there's a, I don't know, it's like an engine grill or whatever you call it. I don't know the technical term for it, but it's normally just black plastic.
And it's painted.
It's painted. Yeah, it's painted. So that was a big thing. Only those who know will know. Like you can't just like get that. It was a very ridiculously expensive option.
The fact that I remember this car, like I've probably only seen that picture like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And I still remember it vividly. Like
Yeah.
I can picture exactly how it's sitting and
Yeah.
the color, and because it was just so insane to me
Yeah.
that this was happening.
Yeah. So, I mean, from just looking at the photo though, you'll think that it's a slightly bluish silver, but it's a color that just has to be appreciated in person, just the depth on that. And I didn't get to see that car in particular, but I saw it on a 918 that belonged to Herb Chambers. He has a same colored 918. And then when I saw that color in person there, I was like, okay, there's depth to this. And
So tell me about how, like, this is a great example and segue into like how you went from Instagram to real life, because the reality is you have been on trips with people with you know, PTS cars, big Porsche collectors. You host events that gather like PTS cars and you organize them like the proper obsessive compulsive person you are.
Right.
And, you know, this has actually become part of your real life. This is no longer just, oh, I've gathered a post and I've written like a nice blurb about it. Like, how has this changed your life from being like, I posted a picture to my days are different now?
Yeah. So it's something that I never had anticipated, but really it really first started off with a lot of people starting to reach out about, hey, I just took delivery of this PTS Viper Green car or some other PTS car. And then I would just have conversations, right, with them through DM. And it didn't just stop at, hey, can you send me pictures? I want to post it. It's like, how do you like the car? That's what I was more curious about. Why did you pick that color? And I really wanted to even include that in my posts, is what the owner's story behind it. It's not just a car I want to feature. Like I want to feature like about like why the owner picked that color. Maybe there's a long personal story behind that, right? So that's how I got to start to interact with a lot of people through DM, is that I would just probe, but not like cross the line, but just ask like why they picked that color. And that has evolved into just group, forming a lot of new friends that I would have never met through anywhere else but through Instagram. Friends in Europe, friends in other parts of the U.S. too, and there are a few that I just talk to still on a daily basis that I've met through Instagram. And it all started out with that person asking me a question about a color, and then it kind of spiraled into a conversation. And can I get your number? And then like we start talking more. Yeah.
And it's like the casual, oh, hey, it's weird though, because you told this story about meeting this guy in the city who's just like, hey, I've got a car you'll like to see.
Yeah.
That's just happening on a different level.
Yeah. It's interesting. From my perspective, I still consider myself, okay, everyone is an enthusiast, yes, but I don't own one of these like really nice Porsches, right? So I'm still like an aspiring owner, right? As an aspiring owner, or as like a lot of us, we love it when owners are very like willing to share details about their car, like, hey, like check it out, yeah, sure, like ask me questions, right? But I didn't realize that from the owner's perspective, how excited some people can be by the interest that people show towards their car.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And with me in particular, I was just personally, not for the page, just personally like so curious about that car. And I first thought a lot of those specs came out really well, and I'd be like, wow, this is what made you go with that? And then that's where people would be like very inclined to talk about it more. And it really broke this image I have of wealthy people being like, I want to keep my car guarded. And there are a lot of people out
That
there who I
exists.
understand, like they want their privacy respected and all that too, right? But I was just that image of the people who don't want to share details about the car was totally broken when I had these conversations. So that's what I thought was really, really cool about, just making friends through this page.
So on the other side of that, though, I mean, I'm sure there's you must get a lot of submissions. You must have a lot of people coming to you either via email, via DM, like, "Hey, I have this thing,
Yeah.
and mine is amazing, and you need to feature this. You're gonna love it. I've got something for you." Like
Yeah.
kind of like I'm doing you a favor. And in most cases, that's probably true. What's your barrier? What's your filter for what you post? Because I'm sure that your taste it doesn't mean that I don't like it so it doesn't get posted.
Right.
I'm sure you post
Oh.
cars you don't like.
Oh, for sure. I'm sure, Tom, you've seen a couple cars that I would have a lot of opinions about, right?
How do you deal with that?
How do I deal with that? So that's a very good question. No one's really asked me about that before, so I think it's very important. The filter I have, just the very first level is the car has to be paint to sample, right? Because it's the page. The page features paint to sample Porsches. So I love all Porsches, and I don't mean that in a diplomatic way. Like, I would love to have a Porsche in any color, right?
Right.
But just for the sake of the page, I wouldn't feature a guards red car unless for that car it was a paint to sample. And I make that distinction because a guards red car is a guards red car, some might say, but for, let's say, a car like the 991.1 GT3 RS, where it was only available in 4 colors: lava orange, ultraviolet, white, and GT silver, and a couple other like special colors. If you want a guards red on that car, you had to pay $5,500 and go through the PTS hurdles to get a regular Porsche color on that car.
Right.
So my first filter is it has to be paint to sample. Secondly is I weirdly obsess over the quality of the photos. And it might not be evident in all the posts, but sometimes I do get submissions from, and it's less the owners, but more so people who might have just like seen one on the streets and they just like only had a second to take pictures of it.
Right. It's driving by.
Right? And as much as I love the car, unless it's an incredibly unique car,
you saw a one of one
or whatever, then I tend to not, or I ask to see if they have any better photos of it, because for me, what's also important now is, to a certain extent, I want to post now to do well. I'm not like obsessing over the likes or all that necessarily. I keep track of it just to kind of gauge like how popular the page is still. But to answer the question, I do try to ask for and want like somewhat high quality. And I mean, I'm not talking DSLR photos by all means. Like an iPhone
does fine.
iPhones, yeah, I actually think iPhones do a like 90% just for Instagram, 90% of the job. Yeah, for sure. For Instagram. I'm not talking. Yeah.
But you've got to have a picture of the full car.
Yeah, of the full car. Yeah. So I'm if let's say this person took pictures of a car that's like really tightly parked within a dealership inventory, and like it's also only showing a part of it, then I would not want to, and I would probably kindly just ask for, okay, when that car maybe comes out of its inventory.
But if someone's car, like let's say someone just like sends you something that the photos are all there, you've got the story, you've got everything, but it is just like egregiously ugly.
Oh, then actually I would love to post that. Yeah. Because I want this page to really show what's possible. And I think with Porsche exclusive as well, what they want to emphasize, and not that I'm like an ambassador for them, but I can also imagine they care more about like offering people choices. And I want to show that too, right? So I want to show, and I want to let the people speak and voice over it. I rarely actually voice my opinion, especially negative opinions. I never.
Your comments are quite factual, yet still somehow not boring. I don't know. That is like an actual fine balance of being like not trying to put your 2 cents in, but also making it interesting.
Well, yeah, I just don't think my opinion matters. It's just one opinion. So that's why I love reading the comments. And there are certain cars that I can think of, and I'm sure you probably remember, that are like really polarizing. And you read through the comments, and some of the comments can go really bad. And if they start going into very hateful stuff or whatever, I just delete.
Yeah, you have to moderate.
I have to moderate. To some
Yeah,
extent.
I do the same thing on YouTube.
But if someone is just being very critical about it, then
that's fine.
I want to leave it up there.
If it's an objective criticism, that's fine. But if they're like, oh, the kind of guy who does that, and then lists like some horrible thing, you're like, okay, that's not productive.
Right.
Well, all right. But so you say your opinion doesn't matter, but the reality is your opinion does matter, because I'm sure you get berated with people who are asking you for advice.
Yes.
How does that work?
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good question too. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I still have so much more to learn about this program. And it's also just my taste. My taste should not have any influence in what you want, right? So I do get asked about like, hey, like, can you help me? Can you like look over my spec? That's a common request I get is, hey, can you look over my spec to make sure if there's anything I missed out on? And I'm not going to spend so much time making sure, that person didn't miss the smoking package or whatever, the luggage net or something like that. But I can skim through it and just give my advice, and that's about it. And then there are other people who are like, what do you think of my spec? And that's a very difficult question to me, because I mean, it doesn't take, I have no hesitation thinking about it in my head as to what I think about it. It is what I think about it. But there are certain cars that I get asked from owners who are very enthusiastic about their cars, but also, weirdly enough, my opinion apparently like matters. And I'm not saying this just like, I'm not making this up.
No.
Like I've had people explain to me, and I totally understand, I'm sure, but they say, hey, like, you have great taste, or like, you know a lot, like, I really respect your opinion, right? But it's already for a finished car. Like, what am I supposed to do, right? So in that respect, I still, and some people might call me out for being dishonest or whatever, but I never mention anything negative. I say if it's a very polarizing thing, and I say that's very bold, and it's very true. That's not.
Yeah, those are good.
Yeah.
No, it's true. You've got those words that you can go to.
Yeah.
Where
I never criticize anyone's car to any, like, especially to the owner, and I rarely even want to like talk about like, talk negatively about someone's car just behind their backs too, because at the end of the day, it's what they wanted. And they did it. If they like it, then props to them. But yeah, so I definitely don't want to burst anyone's bubble. And I don't mean that in like a condescending way, but they spec'd it for their reason. So I say props for making it very interesting and all that. And I do ask though, sometimes like, hey, I noticed that those headlight washers are like red while the entire car is green and the interior is saddle. And then you know what? I ask nicely, and I get nicely worded answers, because it could very much turn into a very personal conversation. Like, oh, like that's if you tone it in a certain way, then people get very defensive, understandably so, because it's their vision of a nice looking car, right? But I do ask like, hey, why'd you do that? And then I love the stories that I get. Sometimes it even boils down to the headlight washers. There's a reason why it's red, and it's because with this one particular car that I'll give you as an example. It was an Irish green GT3 with black wheels. The rim edging was in red. The headlight washers, like the little nipples on were red. The inside was the seats, and most of the interior were saddle. It's like cognac, so it's a type of saddle with houndstooth. And then there were also bits, like contrasts of yellow stitching and like red bits here and there. So
very busy.
What you got was and that car was not received very well. The owner was like completely fine about it.
Right.
But for me, I asked, my first question was, what inspired that spec, right? And I'm sure a lot of people want to know why, right? There's a reason why it has to be spec'd that way. And the owner, if I recall correctly, said it reminded me of a certain Ferrari that I fell in love with, and that Ferrari it was a green Ferrari with yellow and red contrast here and there, or it was something like that, or it was something about the Ferrari logo, or there was something associated with Ferraris, but he had a reason for it. Okay,
which must have been very interesting to explain to a Porsche dealer.
Yeah. I know, and actually I don't even know if he had a lot of Ferraris, but that was his reasoning. I was like, okay, well, there's a reason for this, and there's a reason for why a lot of cars are spec'd in very, very unique ways. And I want to know about that. I want to share that part. I don't care about my opinion. I only care about my opinion, but I don't think anyone else should know like what I think about it. Unless I really love it, then I definitely mention
Well, but what would be like, today I give you, let's say I give you 200-300 grand and I say go spec out your car. Like what are you buying today?
What am I buying today? So I mean, now you can only get a 992. So can we pedal back?
We can pedal back. You can have a GT3 in the 901 generation.
Yes.
Attaboy.
All right. Yeah, that's my dream car.
Let's pretend.
Yeah. So honestly, even over a GT2 RS, I would go for a 991.2 GT3 Touring. I think that car it really captures my personality very well. So I don't really like attention that much, and I like subtle colors.
And you better learn that manual.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'd be like, yeah, if I imagine myself like getting into one of those and being like, this is now an excuse. Well, this is
now I'm forced.
Now I'm forced to have a manual. I even thought through all that, even though I didn't even get it.
So high level, because I bet you could probably talk for another 2 hours about every effing detail, like a Nick Murray configurator video.
Yeah.
But high level, what does your car look like?
It is a Brewster Green GT3 Touring with wheels in satin aluminum, which is not silver. It's not gloss silver, but it's like a matte finish silver. And with ceramic brakes. Don't ask me why steel versus ceramic. I just love ceramic brakes.
Well, and you got to have those yellow calipers.
Exactly.
Or are you painting them black? Are you keeping them yellow?
I would keep it probably yellow because I like to keep things factory.
All right.
But if it was available from the factory in black, I would definitely go black. Yes. And then the inside, this is where I would try to do some CXX. So the interior in the GT3 from the configurator, you can't do any other color than black. So I would ask for tarpan brown, which is the brown that they use in the 911R. So it's a different brown than espresso or other types of browns that they have on the configurator for other cars. Tarpan is exclusive to the 911R, and I would really want that because that tone of brown is just the right for me. So the inside would be in tarpan brown with the lightweight, the bucket seats. Houndstooth, I know, is overplayed these days, I would say, to some extent, but I think for that car, the Houndstooth, the Pepita inserts really belong on it.
Man. It looks good.
Yeah. And then the stitching, this is where I actually dwelled about it for a while, even though I would never, I can't get the car. I would get it in either black stitching, like very like faintly visible,
sure,
or actually to contrast that with some sort of like creamy beige or like silver stitching, but just around the seats and then the dash, nothing too crazy.
And is the dash still going to be black? And
yeah, the dash itself, yeah, again, very good question. Don't know if it's two-tone black or brown I would want to go for, but the 911R, it was full tarpan brown, so I would go for a full tarpan brown, but I would probably go through multiple iterations to see if that looks good.
Yeah, I love a two-tone dash, man.
Two-tone dash is good, especially for like the brighter tans. I can't do a full bright tan interior, but for like a really dark brown, you can't even really see the difference.
No, it's good. The bright ones are tricky though because they reflect in the windshield so much.
Yeah. So there's another, that's the more, I would say, practical reason why you want to do two-tone.
These are like the ultimate first world problems.
I know. Doug Demure, I hate to like name drop him all the time, but he hates the fact that people are obsessing over stitching and all that on a GT3, and I understand that too.
But I mean,
for me, I would.
He also thinks that a lot of, no offense, Doug, but Doug thinks that a lot of like bad cars are good, in my opinion. Like he like cars that just drive poorly. Like I respect I'm not, look, I totally respect like when he's like, oh, an HHR with like the panel vent. Yeah, hell yeah, absolutely. Like I'm with you 100%.
Yeah.
But there are some cars where he's like, oh, and this handle's so good, and I'm like, it does not. It absolutely does not. So but whatever. That's just my 2 cents. That's fine. Everyone has their opinion.
Right. But going back to the GT3 Touring though, I think for me, some people might think, but the GT3 Touring, like it's the GT3 itself is like a track car or whatever. Like, why are you obsessing over? Why are you making it so anti-track? And for me, probably if I see myself in a GT3 Touring, I don't think I can honestly say I don't think I would take that thing to the track. Like, maybe a once to like check it off and see like how it feels in the track. But for me, I get much more enjoyment personally driving through nice roads and stuff like that. And again, as you had said before, I'm not a speed freak. I love ringing it in low gear and hearing all that. That's the that's plenty of drama for me.
I like watching. So Oak Green Metallic has that GT3 touring, and he drives in through like northern Italy and Switzerland. He's always in like mountainous, crazy
Right.
areas. I love watching his stories just because he's in locations that I can't go to.
Yeah.
It's especially right now because
Yeah.
America, we can't go anywhere. But yeah, speaking of that though, like what is limiting for you right now with COVID? Because typically you would be putting on your event Rare Shades,
Right.
which is like a collection of PTS cars in certain locations, kind of like it's like the Radwood of PTS.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you do that in collaboration with 000 Magazine.
Yeah, 000 Magazine. And then we have different sponsors based on, not sponsors, but different partners based on where we're hosting it. But yeah, to answer your question, what would I have been doing if it weren't for COVID? The number one thing would have been Rare Shades 5, so the 5th iteration of this Rare Shades show they described. And to explain it very briefly, it's with 000 Magazine, and it's essentially it's a show that only focuses on paint to sample cars. It's a gathering for the paint to sample nerds on Rentless and whatever to bring their cars. Finally, a show where they can shine, right? And the way we arranged the show is, I think, what makes it very unique is, and this was an idea that almost didn't make it to the finish line because of like the logistical nightmare behind that. But I came up with the idea of actually like curating that in a rainbow. So curating the car, and that's really characteristic of Rare Shades, is all the cars are arranged in like the spectrum of a rainbow. So it starts from red, and then the shades go into orange, and then to yellow, and then to green. And then we use the venue, the space that we're given, to really display that in like a really effective way.
I've seen the photos, and I remember when you were getting ready for Rare Shades 1, you showed me like the Excel document, and you had like palletized the arrangement of all the people who are coming, and like it made a lot of an RSVP has never been more important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then because if so before we actually launch the event, we, as you said, we have it on an Excel document. Every cell is like a parking space, and then we actually, like, I do a color drop, an eyedropper. I use an eyedropper to actually put in the color of the actual car in there, and then that's where I start shuffling the arrangement of the cars. What happens in real life is that some people are inevitably going to be late, or they are just not going to show up even though they paid the registration fee, right?
Right.
And so then sometimes we have like an odd space there, but then what we've realized is, hey, let's make that sort of like, let's make it a thing where now don't look at it as a gap, but look at it as that's a space where people can now take pictures from that angle. They can take pictures of,
not only that, but it shows that there is a missing color.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it doesn't go this, that. There are shades in between.
Right.
So, all right, with all this being said, what is the landscape of Instagram now? Because it is not the same. You are not getting 50,000 followers a month.
Yeah.
Things slow down. However, you've still managed to grow, and I think this is what I think is really critical for social media people, including myself, because there's going to be a time where you either hit stagnation or the platform changes, and that doesn't mean that you're over. It means that like you've used that audience to grow something else. And right now, I think PTSRS has totally changed the landscape of like what these types of car accounts can be and how they can translate to real life. You've made actual car shows. You've met actual collectors. Collectors come to you to talk about things. You're part of this Porsche world, which is a very, very small community. Where do you go from here? Do you just continue doing that? Do you start doing merchandising? Do you work with Porsche?
Is this the where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah, kind of. This is a little bit of an interview, but I know that you have your gripes with Instagram.
Yeah, I have my thoughts. So yeah, it's a very valid question. And to tie it to your question about the landscape of Instagram, that's where my thought is headed at. It's directly linked to my thoughts on Instagram in particular. So to sum it up, Instagram is becoming just more and more of a hot mess. Just with every week now, I feel like we're seeing all these new features being added, and the algorithm is constantly being tweaked. So as opposed to a couple of years ago when I think that a lot of the growth was enabled due to the algorithm just playing it very simple. If it's a popular post, as long as it's laid out chronologically and people see it at peak time, that post will do very well and it'll just grow organically. Now, Instagram has really flubbed how like certain posts come up to the top, and a lot of folks don't even see my posts anymore on their home pages, right?
And that's true. I like every post you make,
Yeah.
and it doesn't mean that I'm going to see your post displayed. There's
Right.
times when I go back to your feed and I'm like, I've missed like 6 posts.
Right. And so as a result of that, the landscape has changed in that it's a lot harder for people to, I would say, grow their audience organically, because a lot of people are just missing out, and Instagram has a lot more control and they don't really mention how like the algorithm works, right? Because they don't want to, right? That's data for them. So that's how it has changed. And as a result, I don't obsess over the likes, but I certainly keep track of it. The likes on my posts have gone down, and this is not just about on my page, but just in general.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, the number of likes have gone down, and then there's certain weird outbursts of certain posts that kind of catch the algorithm wave and then just break into like tens of thousands of likes, right? And no one can explain for why how that happened. So anyways, long story short, Instagram has kind of gotten beyond my control, and I realized at the end of the day, you do not want to be at the mercy of a platform for your brand.
And especially it can get hacked.
Exactly, too. Yeah, that totally. So for me, I realized at a certain point that PTSRS wasn't just going to be an Instagram page. It's the foundation of my fascination for car colors in general, right? And so I won't forget that. And right now, I did launch like a website for people to access PTSRS through other than just Instagram.
Sure.
But it still directly feeds to Instagram. But besides that, I'm working on some things that really will really be, I would say, a true reflection of me today, which is I love Porsche colors, but I love car colors in general. So I'm very excited. I've been working on that for some time, and to answer your question about what do I see as a future of PTSRS is that I think for the time being, as long as Porsche continues to, have the paint to sample program available, then I will always post the latest on the newest paint to sample Porsches, which is my tagline, right? And because again, because I do it for fun. I earn no income out of that. It's just purely my hobby still to this day. So that won't stop for the time being. But I also want to branch out of just the Instagram page, and yeah, I'll keep it at that. But I love car colors from not just Porsches, I would just say. I'll say that.
Well, I think you've done a very good job of kind of being the man behind the page for a very long time, and you're one of the few people that I've met behind either a channel or a page like this where you are even more interesting than the thing you curate, which is, and I'm not trying to just blow smoke up your ass, like that is not true for most people. I know a lot of people with really, really, really big pages, and then you meet the people behind them and you're like, wow, that like 14-year-old figured this out, or like, it's just like some older dude who's like really mean or bitter. And you're like, well, I get why you don't talk to people with your actual face. You'd probably alienate everybody. You're like a very approachable person. You're incredibly knowledgeable. And I hope to see more. I mean, I always like to have the exclusive, but I'd hope to see more of you being part of this thing you've made. Because although, yes, you're making this thing for the people, it doesn't mean that you have to just be behind the curtain all the time.
And that's something that, honestly, I've always made it about the cars. And I think you've known me early enough where that was at a stage where I was not comfortable even doing, like, showing my face.
No, you wouldn't even be on my camera.
Right. Just because I had a hesitation for PTSRS to be like more of a Will Lee, but now I'm embracing more the fact that it's not a matter of vanity or whatever, but just being myself. It allows, if I put my name to PTSRS, and then also sometimes I show that I'm not just some Porsche repost page or whatever like that, then I'm able to connect with people better and more organically. And I just, then it's very cliche, but I can be myself more.
Yeah.
So I definitely, to your point with PTSRS, I think you've already seen that with me posting about my non-Porsche Mercedes, and the comments that I've really gotten, I was so grateful for the amount of interest that that car got. And that made me realize, okay, it doesn't hurt to add more of me into it.
You're hearing the negativity before it exists, and it's not even going to happen. People aren't going to be like, "Well, you're a monster. How dare you put a Mercedes on here?" All right. Before we wrap up, tell me about the new page that you've created for the T50.
Oh yeah. So I was I started a page called Gordon Murray T50. Without the dot, which. Oh, I screenshot that interaction of someone wrote down in the comments saying like, details matter for this car. How could you omit the dot? And I was like, it's personal preference or whatever. But anyways, so
that is your red windshield washer.
Yeah.
There you go. Or your headlight washer.
Yeah. That's just my preference. Anyway, so I started this page as
easier to type.
That's huge.
Like
easier to tag and all that.
All I'm saying is like no dot makes that so much easier. So you can complain all you want. All right, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So essentially, I want to curate a registry of all 100 of the GMA T50s, and what better way than to start it on Instagram? The only thing that I know how to do and run, right? So, and I started on Instagram because, well, first of all, at that time when the T50 came out, my whole fascination was I knew the car was great and all that, but like, okay, when are the first cars going to come out? And I want to see like how it was just me back in 2016 with the whole like I want to gather all the data on the painted sample RSs.
Well, imagine if that like consistent registry existed for F1s at the, like on the fly at the time, not trying to go back and gather them, not trying to figure out, here's a picture of this one after it was totaled and rebuilt 5 times and all this other crap. It's like, no, you could actually curate this page to show real time these things coming off an assembly line, someone collecting it, and the differences in the cars, and with the same quality that you've done with PTSRS, which is not anyone else doing something like this would really have a massive learning curve, and the audience wouldn't necessarily be able to trust what the post is going to be. So I think no one is better than you to make that happen.
No, I really appreciate that. And I just want to clarify too that I know almost nothing about this T50. I'm still like only learning about the car right now through the videos, the tons of videos that are out there.
But that's the information that's out there.
Yeah. And the thing is, that's how I learn more about these cars. And the registry kind of gives me a purpose to learn more about these cars. That's how I really learned about PTS, because I didn't know about PTS at all when I started the page. I only got to how much I know about the program now through this registry that I got started, right? So I want to do the same thing. I want to learn more about the T50. It's a personal passion of mine. I love the car for what it is. And I feel that the most organic way that most fulfilling to me is to just gather data on Instagram, and maybe through a website or all that too.
Well, I hope you get to experience that. I hope you get to like do more Porsche stuff soon. I hope COVID lets us go and spread our wings and be happy out and about. But thank you so much for coming on. And I hope the next time you come on, you've got your heels dug into this T50 stuff, and then we can start talking about.
Yeah. And then I would love to definitely, maybe in the next time, if you'd be so kind to do so, talk about quirky cars, regular cars.
Oh, all right.
Oh, yeah.
So it's funny. I have a ton of notes for this interview.
Yeah.
And I have everything from like oddball Hondas and specs on like cars that you're like, oh, it's a Canadian spec. Why is that in the US?
I would love to talk about that.
And like
with you.
Also, I have a note about Korean seatbelt use.
Oh yeah.
And how that's like a big thing. Yeah. And I'm like, well, so
we'll keep that.
We could literally talk for hours, but I think this is just great. I'm so happy you came on.
Thank you.
When you agree to get on one of my platforms, I feel this immense responsibility to keep it classy.
No, the thing is, I told you as I was coming in today, I felt like I was going to a doctor's appointment, because this is my first time like speaking in front of a mic. You know, I have these conversations with you all the time, right?
Right.
But and you know, it's not like I have an additional pressure now. You really make it easy for someone to just really talk casually about like all these topics that we'd anyways talk about. But it's thanks to your channel where I was comfortable more being in front of the camera, and also even my parents watch your videos from time to time, especially the ones where my face is plastered on the thumbnail, like the one that I learned the manual in.
I do love that.
Yeah. And then also, now through the podcast. So I have many reasons why I would be very grateful to you as well.
Well, thank
for
you.
Bringing me on board.
Tell all your friends. Tell Jerry Seinfeld. Okay. All right. Thanks for being on.
Thank you.
So what do you think? Is that the guy you thought was behind the Instagram page? I'll tell you, he's one of those guys. I met him in a parking lot. He's a parking lot friend. I meet a lot of my friends in parking lots, and that's always a very strange thing to tell somebody when they say, "Where did you meet your friends?" Well, I met him in a parking lot. Meet everybody in a parking lot because that's how car people meet each other. Where are the cars? In the lot. So no, he's not an old stodgy white dude with a collection of 50 Porsches, just celebrating his own vehicles. He's just an enthusiast like everybody else, and he's made incredible connections over the past years, and I can't wait to see where he goes because I really don't think Instagram is the limit on this. I think he's got a lot of avenues to go through, and now he knows everyone, and everybody likes him. He's a very likable guy. He's a very intelligent guy, and if you're lucky enough to meet him, which, you'd really have to know who he was. You probably wouldn't pick him out. If you saw him at his own car show at Rare Shades, you might not know who he was. So I hope you do get to meet him if you do go to one of those types of shows after the pandemic. And I hope he comes back to the show because, like I said, he's way more than just Porsche. He knows the craziest details about everything, and he has a massive model car collection, which I think some of you guys would appreciate. But thank you so much for listening. Big thank you to the Patreon supporters, especially those double-digit donations. That's like really putting the pressure on me. When the more money you give me, the more guilty I feel, the more content I make. I think that's the trick. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I will see you in the next one. Well, I guess I won't see you. You'll hear me in the next one. Yeah, that one.